Denise Ray documents in her novel Wildcard Quilt her journey returning to her hometown. Ray runs into the challenge of also reconstructing the presence and memories of people who have passed. Through the physical restoration of her grandmother's long-forsaken house, Ray explores her responsibilities to carry on her grandmother's legacy and reignite the soul of her new home. At the age of 20, I found myself homeless. We weren't homeless in the sense of without appropriate shelter. However, this house was not my home anymore. It was a vessel of fear and paranoia that had been plaguing my sleep ever since we escaped from it. I was, in this understanding, homeless for another 3 years. Ray explains when she was rebuilding the house, despite how my heart was wrenched, faced as I was with the hardest reminders of my childhood, I'd never been more content than at the farm, as if I'd lived my whole life to come back. At the farm, Ray battles between her bad memories and her sense of belonging there. One night, my fiance and I were visiting his family. My fiance mentioned the sky being beautiful. I felt a strong need to go back to the house I grew up in and show him what true nighttime looks like away from the city. Then I remembered that would be impossible. I could never go back to that sky again. After reminiscing, Ray remarks, "What is it in us that wants to return to the dream of childhood, to reenact it or fix it? What is it in us that keeps coming back to that potent place?" These questions demonstrate the blurred understanding Ray has of her role in this new project. I had only ever returned to the house once. At first I saw nothing but an empty structure, but then I saw my brother and I playing in the creek behind the house. I saw my mother teaching me how to plant tomatoes and my father teaching me how to parallel park. I saw the spirit of my home. Ray then answers these questions by saying, "I don't think the house is a dwelling anyone thought would last, yet it stands. Something from long ago was yet alive, both inside and outside of me." Ray's answer is important as she explains her connection to the spirit lingering in the forgotten home. When I think of my home now, I remember watching the ghost of my family reenact my memories. Then I see my brother, the present version now, racing down toward me, screaming at me to get away from the house and to never go back there. After one last look, I left. I don't think the ghost came with me. Ray finds her role in the restoration process after connecting with the spirit. Now it was my duty and my honor to be the keeper of my grandmother's house, to uphold, rebuild, and sustain it. In that bending, I was becoming her. In these vows, Ray finally restores the soul of her grandmother to the new home. The first place my mother and I went when homeless was to my mother's childhood home. My grandfather's girlfriend, Rosemary, put a quilt around my shoulders, one that she told me was made by my great-grandmother. The quilt was heavy and rough. After a while, I could feel that my great-grandmother was there with me at that moment. Ray's greatest moment of connection to the house comes when she remembers the people who are now past. I could feel the presence of those who had also known and lived this land, who had brought my life into being. Ray explains that restoring the house brings her closer to the spiritual legacy her past family left behind. The weight of the quilt felt like a hug, and I was filled with such a powerful force of love from the strongest woman I ever knew. I looked back at my family behind me. Our lives were forever changed, but this would not be the end of us. My great-grandmother wouldn't have allowed it. Neither would I. Ray furthers the idea of strengthening her connections to the spirits of her home through the chapter about her Uncle Perry's death. Ray details the final weeks of her uncle's life by describing his cancer diagnosis and his mental decline soon after. Ray's description of death illustrates a common, relatable picture without any exaggeration or polishing. When my father died, his coworkers told me stories about his humor, his dedication, his love of sports, or his pride for me and my brother. I tried to keep this image, but another picture came instead of my mother's face, bloody and broken from my father's anger. No, righteous leader, gone too soon, doesn't describe my father's death. Ray does not attempt to dignify Uncle Percy's decline. His desire to cling to the world of flesh flowered even as he saw the world slipping away, until the doses of morphine were so intense they forced him, wild-eyed, toward another reality. Ray's description is an honest illustration of a man dying from cancer. Other people at my father's funeral will tell me how he fought until the very end. When I think about my father's lifelong health battles, I think of him in the ER, dying, and trying to inflict any pain his depleted body and mind could muster. No, valiant fighter, struck down for the last time, doesn't describe my father's death either. Ray understands that grief is necessary, but that she doesn't need to fall apart due to her loss. During the time he lay in state, I sobbed, rocked, and prayed. When the funeral's over, I told myself, you will not cry. Ray's reaction demonstrates how her connection to the restoration process makes it easier for her to process grief. During the actual ceremony of the funeral, I refused to let myself cry. The people around me saw a fighter who was now at peace. I saw a man who just battled anger and resentment. A fragile glass window slowly chipping away until a great shatter renders it useless. Yes, that is how I see my father's death. Ray's description of the restoration process for her grandmother's home and her Uncle Percy's death illustrates the journey Ray goes on to find her role in this new life she's creating. This spiritual connection is significant to Ray's journey as it solidifies her determination not only to restore the house, but to resurrect the legacy of her grandmother and create her new life. I would name love as safety. I would name home as a place of feeling safe. Looking back at my childhood house, I can find many memories of happiness and joy, but I find very few memories where I felt safe. Now I can say I do feel truly safe. I feel truly loved. I am finally home.